Whoobazoo.com. Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the man, alright. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save me baby from the burning building. Take all the way to sleepless sun, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you. He rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey race fans, welcome to the Whoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to another edition of Drafting the Circuits Radio. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour or possibly more as we discuss everything racing from the past weekend and preview the upcoming weekend. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to the panel. In the studio with me today, as always, Mr. Gray Warren. Gray, good to talk to you this evening.
Good evening, sir. How's everyone?
Wonderful. Wonderful. Seth Eggert in the house. Seth, we missed you the last couple weeks, but I know you've been off covering various races. We're looking forward to hearing about that later in the show. But Seth, good evening.
Good evening.
And then certainly last, but certainly not least, Mr. Richard Youden with us again tonight. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. Yourself?
Excellent, excellent. So NASCAR's coming off a weekend upstate New York, the I Love New York 355 from Watkins Glen, one of the classic road courses of the United States. And we had talked about it last couple weeks that Watkins Glen could possibly produce a spoiler for the chase here, a surprise winner. But as it turned out, it was the most prolific winner of the year, Mr. Martin Truex, who hails from nearby New Jersey. That took the win in the race. It was a bit of a fuel mileage game there at the end. He was able to stretch it a little better than some of the guys close to him there, notably Blaney and Keselowski, who, Keselowski looked to have a shot at the win there, but came up short on fuel. Same with Blaney. They finished this race at a frenetic pace. The shortest NASCAR Cup level race since 1971. The 355 miles at the Glen clocked in at just a little over 2 hours, depending on who you believe, at 2 hours, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes, but just a little over 2 hours. And that was the quickest race since, I believe, Hickory in 1971. That goes way back. So Gray, I know you had a chance to watch all the action from the Glen. So, what are your impressions of Martin Truex there showing his mettle on a road course?
Well, I mean, he's won on road courses before, and he's proved that he's one of the top road racers in the business. I was a little disappointed in the race. I typically, like we talked last week, Watkins Glen has probably the last 3 to 4 years has been probably the best race of the season. Comes down to a really good spirited shootout at the end, and I was a little disappointed in the fuel mileage run this year. And I'm going to throw this out to the rest of the panel. We've seen 2 road races this year with the new stage format, and of course, typically road races strategy is a little bit different than a typical oval race. They tend to lend themselves to their own strategy, and I think the stage racing that has been added to that has kind of, in my opinion, messed up the show for the road races this year. I think Sonoma turned out to be somewhat anticlimactic, and I think this one at Watkins Glen turned out somewhat the same way, with it coming down to a fuel mileage race and not really 2 guys battling it out for the win. But hats off to the '78 team. They played the strategy perfect. The kind of, the race kind of fell into their hands the way it played out, and they were smart and parlayed that into their fourth victory of the year. But I'd like to know how you guys feel about what we've seen this year with the two road races, and typically how strategy, I think, is kind of in those races is kind of somewhat backfired and kind of really diminished the racing at the road races.
Yeah, Gray. Oh, I'm sorry, Seth. Let me just real quick, and then you can jump in after me.
No problem.
The thing is that coming from a guy who's grown up watching road racing almost has natural stages of its own.
It does.
It does. So I mean, throwing the scripted, or planned stages in there, it kind of, like I said, it kind of messes with it. But road racing usually has 3 stints or maybe 4 stints, and you kind of play a different strategy on those naturally. So trying to artificially put the stages in there, to me, like you said, it doesn't make sense. Maybe NASCAR can rethink that. I don't know, but I definitely agree with you that it certainly has kind of like taken something away from the way a road course naturally unfolds. Now, Seth, I'm sorry I stepped on you there, but go right ahead.
You're fine. Now, what I was going to say is, of the 3 road course races we've had so far, the 2 in the Cup Series and 1 in the Xfinity, Sonoma, I would almost say, was a learning experience for the teams as to how the stage racing was going to play in with the road course racing. So that one, to me, is a throwaway almost, because it was the first time they were running stage racing on a road course. Watkins Glen, on the other hand, I've listened to some of the drivers on the radio this weekend, and some of them were complaining that the tires weren't falling off as much as they used to. So that may have been a little bit more of a factor as well. But honestly, I was a little disappointed too. It didn't have as much drama in some senses compared to others. I mean, the Xfinity race, it was the Kyle Busch show. Even though he wheel hopped early in the race, he came back through the field and won by, I think, like 5 seconds or something like that after green and white checkered. In the Cup race, yes, there was fuel mileage. Yes, there was drama there. But we don't really see fuel mileage that often on a road course at all anymore. So it was somewhat refreshing as well. The only other thing I can say as far as road courses, or at least Watkins Glen, run the boot.
I'm just not a fan of a fuel mileage race. I realize at times, once in a while they're gonna come into them, but they do have their own drama. Who's going to run out? Who's going to make it to the end? But they always leave me kind of walking away feeling like, well, wow, that was a dud. You know what I'm saying? As far as somebody just kind of peddling it and going to that. And I understand the strategy of it, and it is compelling to a degree. But I mean, I like to see guys race 2 guys race for the checker. Like some of the finishes we've seen, over the last 4 or 5 years at the Glen. Like we said, that's been some of the best finishes we've had.
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty much everybody's already touched on. You're almost creating a scenario in a road race that doesn't need to be created, and we've talked about this before. Going over the past few years, races at the Glen especially have been some of the best on the of the year, and certainly highlights now the ability of all the drivers to drive these road race circuits. Now you don't have the ringers that you used to get so much. All of these top drivers are all more than capable of winning on a road course. And yeah, you almost feel like NASCAR are trying to maybe manipulate something that maybe doesn't need manipulating here in road races.
It's kind of artificial. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And you've had some great races there in the past. I think the comment you made there, Seth, about running the boot is a great idea. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that would be disappointed in seeing that. The only issue is, I know this was raised by NASCAR before, and their response to that was they don't want to use the boot because that would reduce the number of laps, and then spectators wouldn't get to see as much racing. That was their sort of response to the request to run, the longer track.
But what I would say my counter to that is, how many laps is the Xfinity race at Road America?
Oh, 100%. I mean, don't shoot the messenger here. I do actually.
I know. I'm just saying to NASCAR though. I mean, if that's their argument, then why go to Road America with how few laps they run there? I mean, it's kind of counterintuitive to have that argument at one track and then do the same thing at another track.
Oh, for sure. I mean, NASCAR's the only major series that actually runs the short circuit at the Glen, I believe. I know IndyCar now runs the full circuit, don't they? And I think the endurance races they have there run the full circuit. So, go for it. I mean, there are other considerations which I know sound very, very silly, but from a team's perspective, it would probably need at least another 2 spotters. So there's expenses there that the teams probably wouldn't be too happy about, and all these sort of things to take into consideration.
Yeah, I've read a couple of different comments about running the boot. Now, for the record, I'm all for running the boot. I think the boot is the most interesting and challenging section of that race course, with the uphill, downhill, and the tight turns in there. I was thinking, I said, well, if they can run this race in 2 hours, 7 minutes, why not throw the boot in there and keep the lap count the same, and then they could have them a 3-hour race, right? So, go ahead, Greg.
Let me throw this in too. Why mess with success? I mean, I love Watkins Glen for the sheer speed of it. Those cars really rocket around that place. They're fast, high speed, a lot of fast, high speed corners in that race. And I tell you, I think that adds to the show. I don't know what that would do. I mean, I have seen the Indy cars run the boot and some of the sports cars. I don't know what it would do, with stock cars. I mean, it adds a couple other turns to the track. But I think right now the setup they got is really good and conducive to the stock cars, because it gives a lot of different opportunities around that track right now to pass, and they do carry a lot of speed, which I think adds to the show at Watkins Glen. You're always going to have people, when you do have that extra piece, say it. But the thing that really concerns me is I would like to see NASCAR really take a look at, the stage thing has worked really well at the ovals, but I think it did not work, and I think it adds an element to the race, to the road course race, that really doesn't need to be there, because those races in and to themselves create, like you said, Frank, stages where people will essentially, like what we've always said, they'll run the race backwards, and they'll create, people will pit on different strategies and things like that. But it always seems to, depending on cautions and stuff, even without it, it always seems that brings the field back together toward the end of the race, and you have really close finishes, rather than what we've seen at the 2 road races this year, where the leaders won with second place nowhere in sight.
I think one thing that would help them is if and I know there's obviously they've got to be a little bit careful. There's always caution about this, but I think it would help if Goodyear bought a tyre that had a little bit more drop off on it. I think but I know definitely the Glen, and probably going back to Sonoma as well, there wasn't really that much drop off. So strategy wasn't. It was just basically fuel strategy. There was no tyre strategy involved in it, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's always nice to have that added dimension to it. And you then start looking at the guys who can manage. Not manage fuel, but also manage. You're right, Gray. You manage tires as well.
Right.
I think I would add an extra dimension to it. But I'm sure that Goodyear are very conservative and cautious about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think tire degradation in any series where you have, it doesn't have to be, huge fall off, but any fall off at all where, like you said, the drivers have to manage their tire wear, and it adds an extra element to the race as well. And basically, you're talking about that's the same for everybody, and you're not creating an artificial kind of setup like these stages do on it. It just seems like it just really just throws something into those races that really doesn't need to be there.
For sure.
Yeah, excellent point. So let's talk about some of the other kind of on-track drama we had. So we saw a couple of drivers have run-ins with one or two. We saw Danica and Kyle Busch got in. I believe
Kyle took responsibility for that one.
Right. Danica on the radio says, "Now I know why everybody hates that guy." So then, but then later in the race, it was Kyle and Brad Keselowski who had two of the fastest cars on the day. And they were battling side by side. Both ended up, off course slightly. Kyle very, very frustrated. I believe he even said that he bet Keselowski better not come around because he'd kill him, which I'm sure was said in the heat of the moment. I'm sure he didn't intend to murder anybody, but man, that blew up out of proportion, and people exploded on Kyle on Twitter, and Kyle exploded back, and it's kind of funny because Seth, I was telling you earlier, I've been watching this on NBC Sports Network, the NASCAR Decades, and they had a whole program about the 70s and a whole program about the 80s, and there was a whole section on some of these rivalries, between like Dale Jr. and Rusty and Darrell Waltrip and Dale Senior and everybody, Dale and Jeff Bodine, right? And I just thought to myself, I said, boy, what if those guys had Twitter back then, I just can't imagine what some of that would have looked like. But because those guys just settled it in the garage.
Going back to Kyle's comments, the last time, if I remember correctly, that he threatened to kill someone, we had him and Ron Hornaday in the truck race at Texas. If you remember what happened that day, when he, under caution, rammed Hornaday, turning Hornaday up into the outside wall, and Hornaday's rear end landed in his windshield.
Yeah. I don't think you'll see a Kyle Busch do that today.
I'm not saying he's going to.
And of course, if you remember the legendary Keselowski and Carl Edwards, they end up flipping one another at on the
different tracks.
Yeah, on different tracks. So, I don't see that this culminating into an on-track incident again. It seems like these guys can blow off the steam on social media, and it's much more constructive than trying to smash into the guy the next week on the track. You know what I mean? Because that's what we've seen in the past, and it just seems like somehow, although the Twitter gives them the opportunity to vent and blow off the steam, it seems like once we get back to the track the next week, everything is hunky dory, good to go. So agree, disagree?
Agreed. I agree with you, but I will say two things. One, Kevin Harvick weighed in on this on his radio show, Happy Hours. His comment was that the incident in general was all on Kyle because this was after Kyle had a pit road penalty and that he was storming through the field. And that Kyle essentially stuck his car on the outside going into the inner loop after Brad had committed to bouncing off of the curb.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that Kevin said was, as far as the phone is concerned, there's a STFU button known as turning off the Wi-Fi.
That's funny.
Now Keselowski vented his frustration not on Twitter. He actually was streaming on Twitch a video game called PlayerUnknown's Battleground, and he said if any Kyle Busch fans wanted to kill him, join him in the game.
Well, Well, there you go. they can kill him figuratively rather than literally. Yeah. So, it's all fun. But
I mean,
these road races tend to get some heated tempers and whatnot. And I think sometimes I don't think the sport has enough of that anymore. Because again, like I told you, I've been watching these nostalgic programs, and just some of the epic rivalries from back then that just escalated, and of course famously, Dale Jr. and Jeff Bodine were called down to Daytona to sit in Bill France's office in a scene that was recreated for the movie Days of Thunder. But I don't know. It's just the side drama maybe was more interesting than the finish of the race this week.
Just going back to that, that incident between those two guys. There is a phrase used in motorsport called a racing incident. And that's exactly what it was. You've got two guys there who were, arguably in the upper echelons of the current NASCAR field. They're not going to give an inch to each other. And the day that they do is the day that they stop racing. And, you look at the replay again. Keselowski had the inside of the corner, the racing line. Kyle Busch was going around the outside. He got ahead. But he knows, this guy's one of the most experienced drivers out there. He's no idiot. He's no rookie. He'll know that with where his car is, Brad will be on the curbs. And he'll know that when you hit those curbs with your front right-hand corner of the car, it kicks you to the left. And that's exactly what happened. And it's like, well, what did you expect to happen? It's a racing incident, and if you start having issues with stuff like that, then you stop racing. And as for the comments about it's pathetic. It's like, grow up, come on.
Now,
I mean, and under certain circumstances, that's almost a criminal offence to threaten people in that way. And you've got to show a bit more maturity and a little bit more respect. And I really hope that he doesn't take it out on the track at Michigan this weekend, or even, in the chase scenarios as you saw with Matt Kenseth in the past.
Now, if I remember correctly, Brad has extended the olive branch, so to speak, through his blog, saying or explaining his side of the story and offering essentially a way to make nice with Kyle, because this has been ongoing off and on for the past several years. You could go back to 2011 when Brad, or 2010, when Brad came out at Bristol and said, "My name is Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch is a..."
Yes, I remember that.
So where this goes back about 7-8 years, and like I said, Brad's written about it. Kyle just never answered. It almost seems like Kyle just does not genuinely like Brad as a person. I mean, I'm not trying to get into that speculation or anything like that, but just the way it comes across at times.
Yeah, interesting enough, you see, now that you mentioned about Kyle tweeting and Brad writing, if just to our listeners, if you never had a chance to read some of Brad's blogs, I mean, he's a pretty darn good writer, and he's got some really insightful thoughts on a lot of kind of different things, NASCAR here and there. And whenever he throws up a new blog, and Brad's blog, I always enjoy reading it. And he's very self-reflective on a lot of that stuff too. So if you haven't had a chance to catch it, I mean, whether you're a Keselowski fan or not, it's definitely a good read. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, basically all this stuff to me is much ado about nothing. Like it used to, in some regards, help sell a few tickets because it would create a little rivalry, and it gives the sport a little bit of color rather than being this, being homogenized. And I saw an article today talking about some of the young kids they're bringing in to the sport, and they need to let them have a personality when they come in. They don't need to have them come in as robots, sit up there and thank all the sponsors and this, that, and the other, and go on their way. They need to let these guys let that personality come through. And I think with Kyle Busch, we know he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he's out there giving 110% in the race car, and he likes to win, and he's giving you his all, and sometimes it rubs people the wrong way, but at least he's out there, giving it his all, and and putting on a show.
Yeah, he's definitely passionate about his sport. No one can take that away from him at all. His passion for the sport, his passion for winning shows.
Yeah, and Keselowski, they all do it. So I'm not, things like this. I think that the media makes a little bit more of it than it is really. But I think like you said, rivalries in our sport are good, and I think that's one of the things that we need at this juncture in the sport. We need to to create a little bit of interest, get the fans a little worked up and riled up too.
Absolutely, yeah, amen. So, speaking of younger drivers being brought in, like you said, so the news broke this week that Casey Kane would be out at Hendrick. We kind of expected that. Some thought maybe the Brickyard win would have saved him. I think the wheels were already in motion. But so the announcement was made this week that young William Byron would step up to the Cup Series, take over that car. Earlier in the season, the announcement was made that Alex Bowman would step up to take the seat in the 88. That team already has Chase Elliott in the 24, who's a rather young driver. So you've got a team of youth here, along with Jimmy Johnson, 7-time champion, to serve as a mentor to those three young guys. So with all this youth on the team, what are your guys' thoughts about the future of Hendrick Racing? Is this a good move to have this much inexperience on the team, or is it an investment in the future, or do you feel like they could use one more veteran on the team?
Well, they've got that. The veterans they've had on the team, other than Jimmy Johnson, haven't produced. You know what I'm saying?
This is true. This is true.
And so I think too, it's a new. I think they're going with a little bit of a youth movement. We can sit here and debate all day long whether William Byron is ready. Personally, I think that he's going to get on-the-job training because the Cup Series is a lot different nut to crack than the Xfinity Series, particularly now. I think, to me, the Xfinity Series is a little bit watered down from what it's been in past years because of some of the rules they've implemented to keep the Cup drivers out. But I think that we can look back at Joey Logano. He was a much heralded young kid when he came along. He goes right in a Joe Gibbs car and had some growing pains there, and eventually lost that ride and really came into his own when he went to the Penske operation. And we look at Joey Logano now; he's still a young buck, but because he started so early, we look at him as a grizzled veteran now because he's got so many years' experience. I think that it's a little bit of a trade-off. They're going to bring Byron in, realizing this, and he's going to get on-the-job training. His first year is going to have peaks and valleys, and they're going to stick with him. But I think, like you said, Frank, it's probably more so an investment in the future. The kid shows promise. He shows talent. Shows that he can be a quick learner, and I think they've just decided to go ahead and do that. Another thing that I was thinking about, we were talking about this off air before the show started. Some of the other things that we've seen with Kurt Busch and Casey Kane losing their rides, and this is your Daytona 500 and your Brickyard 400 winner, arguably your two of your biggest races of the year. Those guys no longer in rides. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, we pushed the issue that teams wanting to renegotiate salary and bring in some younger kids, and there could be some other forces at play leading to that. I'm of the opinion that NASCAR is getting under some pressure from the TV networks to renegotiate the current TV contract as it stands now. And if this does happen, obviously, it's going to be for a lower price, and that's going to mean lower revenue for the owners. And I think this is one of the things that, people are looking at business decisions, and obviously one of the biggest salaries you have is the drivers. So that could be some of the forces at play coming to this too.
And then the other thing, it's not a secret that Monster Energy is spending a whole lot less than Sprint was, or Nextel was, or Winston was before them.
True.
They got it. So there's just less money at the top, and you can, like I say, and you see it in the business world. You can hire somebody very experienced in the business world, but you'll have to pay them what they're worth, or you can pay a young person with a lot of potential a lot less. And then hope for the same results, or invest in getting those results. So yeah, economics is definitely in play here with these young guys picking up the rides there, because and Dale Earnhardt Jr. spoke about this in an article I believe it was in Auto Week, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Seth? Was that Matt,
I believe it was.
Was it a Matt Weaver article?
I don't remember if it was a Matt Weaver article or not, but I do want to say it was in Auto Week. I want to say Matt Weaver spoke with Junior on a radio show that they did with Auto Week, though.
Let me throw in another point there that you made, Frank, about Monster Energy. Monster Energy has yet to come about and pick up their 2-year option, too. There's another thing, too, and it's that's one of the things that's kind of out there too. So that's another thing we're going to have to be looking at, as well. So there's a lot of forces at play here, and obviously it's leading into really one of the probably more active silly seasons that we've seen in recent years. Typically, because most of the drivers and the sponsors are tied together. A lot of those contracts run at least 3-year cycles, and we haven't had a lot of turnover lately because we've had the drivers in these rides with solid sponsorship. Now some of that stuff is up in flux, and I think you're going to see some driver movement based on the needs of the owner. The owner's going to have to bring in someone that can bring sponsor money in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we saw the same thing in IndyCar racing, after the split years and the reunification. The money in the sport is just not what it once was. Back in the 90s when there were, big money sponsors in the sport, there was a whole lot more money to go around. And, if you were to compare IndyCar driver salaries to, say, NASCAR salaries, it's quite a bit less, and I think NASCAR is going through that same cycle that IndyCar did a few years ago, where there's less money coming in, so there's less money going out, and you're going to see some of the bigger names are either going to walk away or get pushed out, it is what it is. It's economics, It's unfortunately we don't have the in auto racing we don't have the viewership of say the NFL or the NBA where these drivers can command these incredible salaries anymore. So it's a different game.
Well, yeah, and it's just the changing times. It's the economic climate out there right now. And one thing that we have seen that is clearly evident is NASCAR's TV ratings are on the decline. The attendance at the racetrack is on the decline, and that's what sponsorship and those values are drive the sport. So obviously there's going to have to be some adjustment that's coming either now or down the road, inevitably. And I think teams, car owners are beginning to see that and are wanting to prepare. Like I said earlier, I'm the TV networks went to NASCAR last year and kind of really forced their hand, and that's when NASCAR came up with the with the segment format that they introduced this year to see if it could enhance the racing and maybe bring some of the viewers and some of the fans, back to the racetrack. I'm also thinking that, with this commitment that the TV partners made several years ago, and Seth, I'm not sure how long when the current TV contract as it stands was due to expire. What year that was?
I want to say it was a 10-year deal that they signed, and that.
But
I want to say it was signed 2 years ago, so that would make it 2025.
It went in 2020 something, but obviously you can't. Obviously, these networks are not going to hemorrhage money, over half of that period if they're not getting a return on that. So I think they will do what they can to drive NASCAR back to the bargaining table to renegotiate some of that stuff. And I think that's one thing that is out there that is clearly evident that could that's one of the forces driving some of these things that we're going to see going on this year, the remainder of this year, I should say.
Yeah.
And two things. One, Frank, you were right. It is a Matt Weaver article that Dale Jr. Was talking about driver salaries. But second, going back to what you were just saying, Gray, my understanding is that the TV partners were outbidding and overbidding what they expected to make back because they didn't want NBCSN and Fox Sports 1 and also Fox Sports 2 to fail. They wanted to legitimize their sports networks. I mean, I don't know if that was the exact reason, but that would make some sense as to why they overbid, and now they may try to scale back, but I don't know if the contract would allow them, depending on the wording.
Yeah,
right.
Well,
Like I said, well, they can forward. Here's it is. A lot of things they can do to change this, and I'm sure it's a lot of things. And everything is performance driven, and I'm sure they're not going to cut their own throat, and they're not going to hemorrhage money, or then it would. NASCAR will have to renegotiate to some degree because in 2025 or 2022, whenever this thing comes back up, and they say, no, we're not doing this, we're not doing it all, everything comes to a screeching halt. So basically, they've got to work with their TV partner to some degree. And if they want to negotiate, I mean, you got to look at this thing beyond the end of that contract too. To either keep them in the sport or the whole deal could implode.
Absolutely, and to Seth, to your point about them legitimizing the second tier networks, Fox Sports 1 or 2 or NBC Sports, that's an excellent point because those are second tier cable networks, right? Where you would have to pay to get the second tier. So obviously they want more subscribers to buy that next tier of cable service or dish service or whatever to put more money in their pockets. But I mean, what do you think Fox spends to have UFC fighting on Fox Sports 1 and Fox Sports 2? It's got to be phenomenal, right? But how many people?
I would dare say.
Yeah,
I would dare say their ratings are better for UFC fights.
Well,
than they are
sure,
for
yeah,
NASCAR.
Absolutely, yeah. But when you get, you figure, if you're going to pay for Fox Sports 2, if you're going to pay for Fox Sports, 1, you're going to buy enough tier to get Fox Sports 2 because you enjoy NASCAR racing or because you enjoy UFC fighting. I think that's what their thought was with NASCAR, that the race fans would be rabid enough to say, well, we've got to step up and get more subscribers. And I think they're finding some of that, but not as much as they had hoped, if that makes any sense at all. And the other point I wanted to make just about economics in the sport is, there was an announcement made recently. Target is going to be leaving Chip Ganassi Racing, NASCAR. We knew that was coming after they left the IndyCar series a year ago. And it's because the CEO of Target wants to go a different direction besides other than racing sponsorships. But as I look at this, I see how many consumer products are really left in racing. If you look at the IndyCar series, almost all of these sponsors are business-to-business relationships. You've got Fitzgerald glider kits. You've got Arrow Electronics. You've got NTT Data. You don't have Miller Lite. You don't have Coors. You don't have a Target car, a Kmart car. You don't have a Valvoline car. Years ago, sponsors were. It's like they put a sponsor name on the car, and the goal was
consumer brands.
Yeah, the goal was to sell either cigarettes, beer, or motor oil. But there are less and less consumer
brands.
Yeah, there are less and less consumer products in racing. And if you remember, Gray, they used to call the old Busch series. They used to call it the grocery store series.
Sure.
Yeah, because you had the Hellman's mayonnaise car, and you had all these consumer products, but even in NASCAR now, you've got the business to business sponsorships creeping in that are lesser known. So the marketing isn't direct to the consumer anymore, and it's really changed the profile of racing. And it's decreased the amount of money coming in, amongst everything else. So,
but to draw a contrast between NASCAR and IndyCar, it costs an enormous amount more to run a NASCAR team than it does an IndyCar team right now. So those sponsors, to a degree, find it more conducive to get in IndyCar, those business-to-business style sponsorships. Now that may come to NASCAR, but essentially NASCAR would have to sell more business partners to run their season. You've got more races. You've got 38 events compared to what IndyCar runs. So obviously that's where you see so many more sponsors in NASCAR. I mean, I can speak when at RCR we have over 50 partners, and you will see the cars run a different livery every week. Speaking of Ryan Newman, you've got Velveeta has come on board to run several races. We've got Granger, we've got Caterpillar, Wix Filters, just to name a few that are on the 31 car, and those are sold in by races to total up to 38 events. Same way with the number 3 Dow car that's a primary sponsor, but that car runs American Ethanol. It runs several other sponsors throughout the year. So it's taken, it takes more to run that NASCAR program than it does. But you're right. It's going to be NASCAR's really going to, things are going to tighten up in the NASCAR realm as well.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
just
it's interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
Just to piggyback off of Gray a little bit, this kind of started, I mean, economic-wise, if you look at all the different partners that each team has, it really started maybe about 10 years ago when Carl Edwards and Roush went from having just one sponsor to having about 11 in one season. And the only one team that's left that has one sponsor the entire season is Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson, yeah.
Well, Menards as well. You've got Menards. Menards is still...
Yeah, Menards, even though they have many of their different products on the car.
Right.
It's Jimmy Johnson and Paul Menard, although next year Menard's scaling back on the Wood Brothers anyway.
Well, actually, that probably, we don't know the full scale of that yet, but I would dare say that Menards will probably be involved. They're probably going to run 14 races with the Wood Brothers in Menards sponsorship, and I would imagine a good many races of Ryan Blaney's car will be sponsored by Menard too. Hasn't been made public yet, but I'm feeling that's how that whole program is going to go down.
Well, John Menard and Roger Penske are old friends and rivals. Raced the Indy 500 together. You'll see the Menards color on Simon Pagenaud's car 5 to 6 races in the Indy cars. So there's no reason to assume that John Menard would not put some of his money into Penske's NASCAR operation as well.
Oh, sure.
So
yeah,
John Menard was one of the prolific Indy 500 underdogs year in and year out. I know he's his son Paul is involved in NASCAR, but he's him and Roger have an old friendship. So I think you'll see a Menards with Blaney.
It's pure speculation.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's pure speculation, but that's a perfect storm, perfect deal to be put together. Obviously, Menards wanted a stake in the Penske operation. I think Roger probably wanted, given the choice, he would choose young Blaney over Menard, and it kind of worked out for the best part. They could put Menard in which essentially will be a fourth Penske car under the Wood Brothers banner. Bring Ryan up to a house car, and they split the sponsorship up because the Wood Brothers do have a tie-in with Ford Motor Company, and they will get some of the sponsor with the current package that they have now with Blaney. So it's a good situation for Penske, the Wood Brothers, and Menard all the way around. And of course, that was the first blow in silly season. That kind of set the tone and kind of set everything off, everything else in motion.
And speaking of which, is there any word on who's going to run the 27?
Nope. That'll be talked about at a later date. Richard says that Richard has told the company that he plans to run 3 cars, and that he's excited about some of the things that are going on, and they will make an announcement at a later date.
Yeah. I mean, there's some very good drivers available. So hopefully, they find somebody very fitting for that ride. So.
And again, I'm gonna say this too. Go ahead, Richard.
Like RCR faces is obviously the amount of money that Paul brings to the team probably isn't or doesn't equate to 1 out of 3 cars. I'm without knowing the numbers, I'm pretty certain he probably brings in more than 33% of our sponsorship revenue throughout the season. So you're right to say there's plenty good drivers out there who would probably take an opportunity to drive that car, but from the 550 people that are directly employed by RCR, there's sometimes you got to think about those people as well and how they can actually afford to be competitive.
That's true, and like I said, it's going to be tough to replace the Menard sponsorship, and it may take again a series of sponsors putting a package together to fund the 27 for an entire year. So these are things that the marketing department is working on and trying to sell for RCR. So, but I'll say this: a lot of, and I can't speak. I don't know for a fact what Richard's contract is with Chevrolet. I can only talk about my past experience with other teams I've been with. But in those cases, manufacturers stipulate in their contract with the team owner how many cars they have to field. And I know when I was with Bill Davis, contract stipulated that with Dodge we had to field 2 cars, and with Toyota we had to field 2 cars. So I would assume, and again this is mere speculation on my part, that Richard's contract with Chevrolet would require him to field three Chevrolets next year. Again, speculation, and I'm thinking that that's why that he's confident that he will put a package together to run 3 cars next year.
All right. So before we, now Seth, I want you to talk about some of the grassroots kind of stuff that you've been at. But before we do, let's talk about next week. We're going to, is it Michigan?
Yes.
So you want to do some picks for Michigan? I guess whoever wants to go first gets to pick the target car. Good old Kyle Larson has ruled Michigan the last 2 times we've been there. So Who wants the first pick?
I'll take the first pick, but I'm not going to pick Kyle Larson.
Okay, all right.
I'm going to go with the guy who's finished second to Kyle Larson the past 3 times, Chase Elliott.
Excellent pick. That's what I was going to do. That's a good pick. I kind of feel like, he may shed that bridesmaids role this weekend.
All right. Well, Gray, who are you going to pick then?
Well, in view of that Seth's got that, I'm going to say this is always an important race for Ford Motor Company. Right up there, in the shadow of Dearborn. Fords have run good there, and the Wood brothers have had quite the history there over the years and won a bunch of races. I'm going to say Ryan Blaney finds his way back to victory lane this weekend.
That's a good choice too, man. I was kind of thinking that as well. So now, Richard.
I'll just go with Kyle Larson. Sorry, that's me done.
Well, there you go. Yeah, because we left it out there. So
it's like, what's the phrase? Don't look a gift horse down in the mouth or something.
There you go. That's right.
That's right. And I'm gonna.
Thanks, guys.
I'm gonna once again go out on a limb and say, hey, Joey Logano gets him a win in Roger Penske's backyard there in the Michigan area.
A real win?
A real win to get him solidly into the playoffs. So, but with no further ado, Seth, I want you to talk about the last couple weeks of stuff you've been covering. You went to it's the Cars series. Is that correct?
The Cars Tour.
The Cars Tour.
The Cars Tour.
And you saw some really interesting throwback schemes, and just kind of take us through it. You've got all the time you need to talk about it, but just go right ahead because it's really interesting stuff to talk about on air. So, but I don't want to ruin any of it. So go right ahead.
Well, a few months back, the Cars Tour, which is headed by Tony Stevens, announced that they were going to do a throwback 276 at Hickory Motor Speedway. 2 138-lap races, 50 miles each. One for their super late model division, one for their late model stock division. And slowly but surely, teams got on board. They would run throwback schemes. Some had throwback uniforms. The drivers even wore throwback uniforms. You had in super late models, which went caution-free, Tate Fogelman took the lead with about 26 laps to go. Driving a Sam Ard throwback, and he went to victory lane. His father helped take care of Sam Ard after Sam's injury, or I want to say that's what he said. But that was just one of the many throwback schemes. There was a total of 41 cars between the two races entered. Of the 41 cars, 29 ran throwback paint schemes. You had Deke McCaskill driving a number 3 Wrangler car. Josh Berry honored Kelly Earnhardt, thanking her for everything she's done for his career, running a number 38 Mom and Pop's throwback to her late model. Tommy Lemons ran a Rusty Wallace-inspired car. Landon Huffman ran a throwback to his father, Robert Huffman's Toyota Celica from the Goodies Dash series. Dexter Knipe ran a Baby Ruth number 1 car. Justin Carroll paid tribute to Dick Trickle and Dooney Donlevy in a number 90 throwback car. Brandon Setzer paid tribute to his father. Justin Johnson paid tribute to the team owner that his father had. Stephen Parsons ran a Phil Parsons paint scheme. You just had a lot of different throwback paint schemes. I mean, I could keep going. Lane Riggs, Ty Gibbs, Roy Hayes ran a Ned Jarrett paint scheme. Jared Fryer led a Sterling Marlin paint scheme. Austin McDaniel in a Bobby Allison car. Craig Moore in a Bobby Allison car. Cody Haskins in an Alan Kwiecki car. Nolan Pope in a Richard Petty car. I mean, even the photographer for Speed Sport magazine got into the act wearing his old Winston Cup uniform from back in the day. It was just an awesome event. It was a sellout crowd. They even started selling lawn chair seats up in turns 3 and 4 at Hickory. That's how many people showed up. They had a fan fest. They had Harry Gant signing autographs. They had Ned Jarrett signing autographs, Bobby Allison. The pace car they used, ceremonial pace car, was Jack Ingram's number 11, a restored Busch Series car. The race that, honestly, it was the best race I've seen all year long, was the late model stock car race, which was won by Justin Carroll, who channeled his inner White Knight. Their team went all out in the throwback. Not only was it a Dick Trickle paint scheme, but they had a cigarette lighter taped to the dashboard. They had a cigarette taped to the dashboard. He won in a dramatic 3-car battle with Austin McDaniel and Junior Motorsports driver Anthony Alfredo. For 10 to 15 laps, they ran 3 wide off and on around Hickory Motor Speedway, which is impressive just with how narrow and how short of a track it is. 0.363 miles. Somehow they didn't wreck while running 3 wide. Unfortunately, some of the throwback cars were destroyed in the race. Jared Fryer missed the shift and was spun into Josh Berry and Lane Riggs. Although that wreck was 45 laps ago. I will say this. Some of the super late model teams, their race already done, jumped into the action to help repair Jared Fryer's car and Josh Berry's car. Jared Fryer, with the help of some super late model teams, changed a radiator in 3 laps.
That's impressive.
I don't know where else I've ever seen that happen. But in 3 laps, they changed the radiator. That just blew our mind. Josh Berry, unfortunately, even though he was a championship contender along with Lane Riggs, Berry, his team, they weren't able to repair his car enough for him to stay on the lead lap. He actually drove over the hood of Jared Fryer's car in the wreck, hence the radiator. And it broke something in the rear suspension. They ended up finishing about 5 laps down or so, but somehow Fryer and Riggs were able to finish on the lead lap. Their cars were absolutely destroyed, and they finished. I don't know how. But
it sounds like a lot of fun stuff. I do have one question for you, though. Right on the Dick Trickle throwback car. You said they taped a cigarette to the dashboard. Yes. Was it a Winston?
That I don't know. I didn't ask. I did not think to ask about that. But I will say this. I'm going to quote Justin Carroll here. I interviewed him after the race. He put, and I quote, "We even put a cigarette lighter in the car because that's what Dick Trickle, had in there. We also taped a cigarette to the dashboard because that's what he used to do. It's just been fun this whole weekend. That's just Dick Trickle's style, isn't it?"
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, man. Dick Trickle, he was one of the last of the old school guys. You've seen if you watch some old clips, 60s and 70s, you see David Pearson light up a cigarette hopping out of the car, or a couple other guys had cigarette lighters in the car. But Dick Trickle carried this all the way into the mid 90s. So that's a guy we miss in the series. It really had added a lot of color to the series.
And one thing I do want to say before we move on, Justin Carroll, who won in the Dick Trickle throwback, that was his first career win in the Cars Tour. Of all the races he could win in, not only is it the throwback race, but it's in a Dick Trickle throwback car. The man known for having an estimated 1,000 short track late model wins. Isn't that just fitting?
That's absolutely impressive and fitting. So, man, it sounds like you had the best time there. So, Seth, where are you on to next covering? What's your next?
The next Cars Tour race I will be covering is August 26th at Concord Speedway, the Race to Remember 250.
All
and
right.
that will have both super late models and late model stocks competing in two 125 lap races.
Sounds like a fun time, man. There's nothing better than watching those grassroots level late model guys race. So with that being said, let's talk about IndyCar for a little bit, okay? So IndyCar, they're off for a couple of weeks here. The next stop's going to be Pocono in 12 days from now or 11 days from now. But in the interim, we've tested at the Gateway Speedway, where they've repaved it. They've given all the drivers another opportunity they've given each team the opportunity to send one car to the test. And from all accounts, the newly repaved surface is quite racy, and they're looking for a good race. I'm not sure where the ticket sales are at, but those folks that own the Gateway have done a really nice job with that speedway, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's somewhere between a short oval and intermediate oval. I think it's 1.25 miles. So it'll lend itself to some interesting racing. Bigger than Iowa, smaller than say Pocono or Indy. So looking forward to that. Also, speaking of Iowa, Iowa's going to be the site of the next test for the 2018 spec car, which will run in the short oval configuration for the first time. That's going to be this week. It'll be open to the public like the last two tests were. The ones in Mid-Ohio and in Indianapolis, those both went well. High marks for the new car. Looking forward to hearing what comes out of there. So, that being said, IndyCar is taking a little time off there. Sebastian Bourdais, I'm still waiting to hear if he's going to run at Pocono or not. Because they had said Sonoma, then they said Glen. Now he's actually tested the car and cleared to drive. We may see Bourdais at Pocono. So, and Formula One also on a long break. And the thing that keeps coming up during the Formula One break is Mr. Fernando Alonso, who seems to be one of the key players in the Formula One silly season, trying to decide what he wants to do. So, rumors that he was going to run Sonoma at the IndyCar finale have been squashed by Zach Brown. Zach Brown called that fake news. I believe that the only place that has more fake news than Formula One is probably U.S. politics. But speaking of fake news or questionable news, Richard, you and I were talking. There's a little story that floated earlier today that Lance Stroll might be taking Daddy's money to Force India. Do you think there's anything to that, or do you think Lance is better off stay where he's at? So we talked about this earlier, so I just wanted to just open up that conversation again.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if this isn't one of those, you see a lot of sports agents putting their client out, saying, so-and-so wants to go and join another team to get a better contract, or to give, in this case, give Williams a bit of a, come on, lads, we need to be doing a little bit better than this. Because they probably have slightly underperformed, I think that's a fair comment, this year compared to some of the teams like Force India, and obviously they're looking, over their shoulders and see Renault, coming on the horizon, and sort of McLaren and Honda probably aren't a million miles away from them either, especially after their pretty poor showing at the Hungaroring a couple of weeks ago there. But in all fairness, I think that from Lance Stroll's perspective, I think he's in a pretty good place. Vijay Mallya, that whole system and setup there is pretty shaky at times. I mean, he's not even allowed in his own country because otherwise he'll get arrested. So he's got to be a little bit careful there. And they're on about trying to change their name to sort of Force One Racing or something, I think was the word, was the name that was being bandied around. So there's, even harking back to the Eddie Jordan days, that team's always been a little bit on the fly. So I think from Lance's position, he's got a pretty good gig going at Williams there. That he's bringing some money to the team. That drive's going to be his pretty much as long as he wants. And he has stepped up the last few races since the Canadian Grand Prix where he got his points, and then that wild race in Azerbaijan where he managed to get on the podium. I think he's had a pretty good few races. So I think he's gaining that bit of confidence and a bit of momentum. And I think if these stories, I say they're probably fake news, for want of a better word.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what about the story that Vettel doesn't want to sign a 3-year contract with Ferrari because he'd rather sign a 1 contract because he thinks Lewis's seat at McLaren might be open in a year. Have you read that one?
I haven't heard that, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think that with Ferrari, you never really know what you're going to get. Gone are the Schumacher era of the early 2000s, that dominant mould, and there's no doubt that Vettel is one of the top drivers out there, and he wants to keep his options open, and there's no denying that, and you can't blame him for that. And again, it's a little bit of posturing between agents and all this sort of trying to get the best deal for their guys, and at the end of the day, get the best deal for themselves. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's not talk of 1 year, 2 year extension rather than a 3-4 year extension. I mean, obviously Ferrari wants to try and keep some of Vettel's talent as long as possible, but if there's no guarantees that Ferrari are going to be able to produce a championship for him, I'm sure Sebastian looks at the Alonso case and potentially the similarities between Fernando's career and Sebastian's career are quite similar. Fernando came out the blocks as a young kid and won 2 championships with Renault, then thought he'd go off to, the greener grass of the other side of the fence sort of thing. And it didn't really work out with his moves to McLaren and then back to Renault, then Ferrari, and then back to McLaren. He's never really achieved what he's capable of, and I'm sure Vettel wants to look and, he's retired. Has he got all the championships he deserves? Now, he's won 4 of the things already. But, that was with one particular car and one particularly dominant car. He hasn't achieved what Schumacher achieved when he went to Ferrari and moulded the team around him and became successful that way. You're probably never going to see that these days with the money floating around and the competitiveness between manufacturers. But I think Sebastian's probably looking at his career in the long term and thinking, I don't want to box myself into a deal here that I can't get out of. So it wouldn't surprise me if they do try and get, if not a short-term contract, but a contract that has a breaking clause in it that would allow him to move on if a Mercedes or a Red Bull or a McLaren drive became available.
A McLaren drive? Does he really want that?
Well,
Speaking of McLaren drive, so I'm sorry.
People, just talking about that briefly. Okay, the Hungaroring was the track that will suit Honda. There's no doubt about that. But you can say what you like. They are improving. They are slowly getting better. And, if Honda, my opinion on it is, if Honda stick to it, they will be successful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
No
History proves that, yeah. I mean, Honda's
yeah.
down, but never out. Yeah, but do you see Alonso in a McLaren with a Honda next year?
Yes, I do. I think it's gone very, very quiet. I think if there was some real moving and some real movement and some, him going to another car or even another series, you'd heard a lot more. 2 months ago there was all this. Oh, if McLaren aren't winning races by Hungaroring, I'm going to leave, or whatever date he gave. Maybe it was Singapore or one of these races.
I think he said by September is what he said.
Yeah.
If we don't win by September, I'm out.
It is the European season then. And no offense, they're not going to be winning races by September. But that drum that he's been banging has gone pretty quiet, and maybe there's. Maybe he knows more about what's going on within the inner workings of Honda than journalists do. I think that there's the I think there's a potential that Honda will step up and will develop, and they are getting better. There is no doubt about that, and they are getting more and more competitive. And Hungaroring showed that McLaren chassis is a pretty damn good chassis. You know, they've got their head of aero used to be Adrian Newey's right-hand man at Red Bull, so he's brought a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience there. And maybe in the first year or so that he was there, it took him a while to step out of Adrian Newey's shadow and set that whole deal up himself. But it really, really wouldn't surprise me if they don't start to succeed. And on the flip side, where would McLaren go? Both Ferrari and Mercedes have brought out supplying an engine. Would they want a Renault engine? Are Renault engines any better than Honda engines at the moment? Maybe that's what they're stuck with. And again, you know, McLaren are not an organisation. You look back through their history, they're not an organisation that will play second fiddle to a manufacturer team. They wouldn't. When this rumours came out about that they were starting to, you know, talk to Mercedes for a 2018 engine deal, I'm sure that was just to try and, you know, kick Honda more than anything, because there is no way that, and I know they're under new ownership now, but the philosophy of McLaren would not be to be a customer team. It just wouldn't work. I mean, they did it for a few years before Mercedes started to dominate, but I can't see that happening. And again, could you ever really see McLaren running a Ferrari engine? You know,
no. I mean, you're talking. That's that's a sign of the apocalypse.
Exactly.
Richard, one more Formula One question before we close for the evening. Robert Kubica had another test with Renault, this time in the 2017 car. Very successful test. He was fourth quick of all the drivers there in the test. Do you think there is real interest in putting him in that car in 2018 over Jordan Palmer? Do you think Robert is because I mean, I've heard that this is all a PR stunt, but every time Robert gets in the car, he's rather impressive.
I mean, the first to address that PR stunt perspective, you know, we're not, you know, Formula One teams don't play little games like that these days. The track time and the data they collect from these tests, with the limited amount of testing they have, is so valuable. Then, you know, Renault are not going to play these games. Whether you'll see him in making his return at Melbourne, I don't think he'll make a return at Melbourne. I think he'll make a return before then. I genuinely believe that you could see him in a car the first race post Spa. I read something, again, you read, you know, comment and rumour, that Jolyon Palmer is a pay driver. He brings money to Renault through sponsorship, and that money has been paid up to post Spa. There's a little bit of a sort of a set to between the team and the sponsors. The sponsors are only going to give Renault more money if Renault are going to guarantee that Palmer will be in the car through to the end of the season. Renault aren't going to guarantee that, so the sponsors aren't going to put the money up. It wouldn't surprise me if you don't see him in a car this year. I mean, it makes sense.
They've given him test after test, and he's impressed every time. So I think the guy's ready for a comeback. And recall his early years in the junior series. Man, he was every bit as good as the guys he was running against, which were guys like Hamilton, Vettel, those guys.
Hamilton will tell you that Kubica is the one guy that he respected, and he has, when Hamilton talked about him, he's like, yeah, he's the deal. So it wouldn't surprise me, and if Renault are investing as heavily as it appears to be with their number of engineers they're recruiting over the last few months, and they're having a serious push to become a contender for 2018 with Hülkenberg, who've obviously got a extremely talented driver there. If you have the opportunity to get a number of races with Kubica back in there to give him some track time, to give him some the ability to regain that sort of cut and thrust of driving an F1 car again. And that Palmer's out, and you may lose a few $1 million here and there in sponsorship, but you know what? You bite the bullet and you go for it.
Outstanding. Yeah, I really hope that happens. That would be good. Everybody loves a feel-good comeback story.
Yeah, this is no disrespect to Julian Palmer, but in all fairness, he didn't have a fantastic 2016. I think the only reason he kept the drive this year was because Magnussen left to go to Haas. I think if Magnussen stayed, you'd see Magnussen and Hülkenberg. So I think he was a little bit on borrowed time. I think what you saw at Hungary when Hülkenberg got passed and he pulled away at like 3/4 of a second a lap, you've had as much as I don't like the concept of swapping drivers mid-season, but the kids had a fair crack at it. And thanks, but just can't quite cut it. And go and do Formula E or touring cars or Le Mans or something.
All right, great insights, Richard. Man, that was good Formula One talk. So, well, guys, we are like way in overtime. We're green, white, checker. So let's go around the table, get some final thoughts for the week. And Gray, I'll start with you. You've been a little quiet here as we've been running through Formula One. So, Gray,
I've been enjoying the talk. Final thoughts for the weekend. Michigan coming up again. We're getting down to really how many is it? 4 or 5 races remaining? 4 races remaining, I think, before we go to the playoffs. So people are going to have to start making some moves. Like you talked about, Joey Logano really needs to kind of erase that encumbered win. Got guys like Clint Boyer and Chase Elliott that still would like to pick up a win and get in the chase. So I think the next few.
Kenseth is right there. He's right.
Kenseth right there too.
Right there on the bubble, yeah.
So we've got some interesting things coming up the next few weeks. So Michigan is just going to kick this next month off before the playoffs.
Absolutely. All right. Now, Seth, you got some final thoughts for the night?
Darrell Wallace Jr. will return to racing this weekend. He will be in the Truck Series in the number 99 MDM Motorsports Chevrolet Silverado, sponsored by Maestro Classic.
All right, good for Darrell. Now, Seth. Now, as long as we're talking about Bubba Wallace, right? He had a shot with the Petty organization, filling in for a while. Do you think there's a full-time Cup ride in 2018 on the radar for him?
Well,
like I said, there's some open spots here and there, and we've talked about the youth movement. Is there any place you see him fitting in quite nicely?
Well, what I will say is Petty has expressed interest in trying to find sponsorship to run Bubba in a second car. Adam Stern of the Sports Business Journal, who broke the news about William Byron, has mentioned that Nickelodeon is expressing interest in possibly sponsoring Darrell Wallace Jr. So
Nickelodeon,
maybe
the television network.
Yes.
Oh, excellent! Yeah.
So maybe we'll see that come together. Maybe we won't, but at least there's someone looking at sponsoring Darrell Wallace Jr.
Yeah, that's outstanding. I hadn't heard that about Nicola. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. Yeah. Anything else, Seth, before we sign off?
Unless Richard has some final thoughts.
Well, yeah, Richard's next. So you're good. So Richard, your final thought for the night?
We've talked about it a lot tonight, but silly season, it's brilliant. It's like watching an episode of like the Kardashians or something. It's fantastic. It really is. It's so much fun. It's almost like a completely separate sport to the racing. The racing's like a byproduct or a separate set of what you see going on with the silly season, the driver markets, and the posturing and the movement. I think it's brilliant. I love silly season, and where people are going to end up and who says what about who and who pays what. It's brilliant. I love it. And you almost want the maximum contract to be a year for any racing driver, just so we can have more of this every year. I love it. It's great.
It is great, you know. And my final thought, I'm just going to piggyback on yours, Richard, because this silly season is shaping up to be probably the biggest in NASCAR we've seen in a number of years. IndyCar up in the air. I mean, the biggest shoot or drop there is will Michael Andretti move his Honda team to Chevrolet? And if that happens, you're going to see a bunch of different fallout with drivers moving here and there. If Michael stays with Honda, it won't be quite as dramatic. But we're going to see a big shakeup in both those series. Formula One, we're going to see a little shakeup here and there. You know, most of the top guys will probably stay where they're at, but it's all interesting. And this time of the year, we've got the thing I hate about this time of the year is NASCAR is gearing up for their chase. Formula One's on their break, and IndyCar, we only have 4 races left for the championship. You know, I'm not a fan of the short season for IndyCar, but the title fight for IndyCar is going to come down to the wire. You've got a lot of really, really good cars right there at the top between Newgarden, Pagenaud, Dixon's right there in the mix. Will Power's in the mix. It's going to be a great next 4 races for IndyCar. It'll go by so quick, and then I'll be missing it. So, and speaking of missing it, I'll be missing you viewers till next week. But I want to thank you, Richard, Seth, Gray. Appreciate you all 3 coming on the show tonight. Love talking to you guys every week. I want to thank the Whoobazoo Radio Network for hosting our show. Guys, this is Drafting the Circus. My name is Frank Santoroski. Good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Whoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.